Hey guys, welcome back to our YouTube channel. In today's video, we are talking all about yearbook distribution. In my experience, it can be one of the most stressful days of the year. It kind of felt like if something can go wrong, it does go wrong. There's going to be typos, there's going to be things that you find or things that the student body finds. There's going to be parents that are upset. There's going to be people that thought they bought a yearbook and they didn't, or maybe you're sold out and they want a yearbook now that they see how cool it is. There's just so many moving parts to it, and I think that that is really stressful. But the antidote to that stress is being super prepared. And so in our planner, there is a really long checklist, and it's very similar to what I'm going to go through today. But if you're interested, next year's planner, the 2023-2024 edition, just came out this week. And so they're on sale now for pre-sale. They're being printed, and then they're going to be shipped out very soon. So they will be at your door guaranteed by July 1st, if not sooner. If you pre-sale, they're going to ship out as soon as they're done printing. So go ahead and head over to our website. It's organizedadvisor.com/planner. Like I said, that checklist is in the planner, and so if you're interested, go ahead and check it out. This is just our second year doing the planner, and so I'd love your feedback also. Let me know what you love, what you didn't love, what you use, what you don't use. We made a lot of changes for year two, and we are including a lot of digital resources in addition to the printed ones, and so I'd love for you to check it out, and I would also love your feedback. But without further ado, let's go ahead and talk distribution. Okay, so like I said, one of the best things that you can do for yearbook distribution is plan ahead. It is a stressful time. There are going to be stressful things that come up, but when you have a plan in place and a procedure and all the words that start with P, you are going to have a place to direct people, and that's going to take the stress out of whatever situation that comes up. Sometimes there are crazy things that happen and the stress is just part of it, but the more that you can plan, the better it's going to go. And so if you've heard me teach at a workshop, you've probably heard me say this. I love this phrase so much. I literally want to get it tattooed on my arm. But it's prior proper planning prevents poor performance. There is a less PG version of this that you might have heard as well. If you're not aware of what I'm talking about, Google it. But this is what I use with students all the time. And I just think it is such good advice for distribution, but it's also just good life advice for students and for people in general. I use this in my life every day. I believe that when you go in to do something, if you don't have a plan, you haven't been prepared, you haven't thought through it, you haven't done the research, you haven't come up with a procedure for if this happens, what do I do? Then you're not going to do as well. You're not prepared. And so if you take the time to think through contingency plans and what's going to happen if this happens and what's the worst case scenario, then mentally you are ready for whatever it gets thrown at you. You're totally fine because you already have a plan in place. And so, like I said, this is great for distribution as a really good example of how the prior proper plan really works. But also it's just good life advice. You don't go to the grocery store when you're hungry and you don't have a list. You know you're going to spend 3 times as much and you're going to get the Cheetos when you really want to get the carrots. Like you have to go into it with a plan that you properly made and you did it ahead of time. You did it prior. So we don't want poor performance for distribution. And as a first year advisor, it can be really scary to even, where do I even start to plan distribution? But I promise I'm going to walk you through it, and it's going to be a lot less stressful because you planned ahead. So there's 2 things that you need to prep. First, it's the physical prep, and then it's the mental prep. So starting with physical, you're going to think through delivery. If you don't already have your books, you're going to want to ask your rep or your front office a couple of questions, so that way when the books get delivered, they have a place to go and you know exactly what to expect. Sometimes the delivery truck just shows up and there's no prior advance notice and you have to figure it out, and so that's what we want to avoid. So the first thing that you need to ask your publisher is, when do you expect to receive your books? I worked at a school where we sold between 1,600 and 1,800 yearbooks. That is so many yearbooks. And I'm not saying that to brag. Honestly, I'm saying that because it's so many that it was a logistical nightmare trying to distribute that many to a school. And so, I didn't just need to know what day they were going to arrive. I needed to know, is it going to be in the morning? Is it going to be after school? Is it going to be in the afternoon when I have classes? Because I needed to coordinate getting those books not just off the truck, but in the building somewhere. And if I had other classes, who's going to watch them, And so you need to know as specifically as you can, when do you expect to receive your books? Sometimes, depending on your freight carrier or the shipment, you can have the driver call you ahead of time, so you have a little window, a heads up on when they're going to arrive, but not always. So you need to be aware of, if you're in a class, if you're unavailable, or who's going to be the one to meet the driver? Is it going to be an administrator, a secretary? Are you expected to go and meet them and then you need someone to cover your class? Get as specific as you can with this because it's helpful to know. And then how many boxes or pallets are you expecting? A couple hundred books looks a lot different than almost 2,000 books. I had absolutely no idea what 1,800 yearbooks looked like. It was also a really big yearbook, so it was a lot of boxes. It took up 2 pallets, like it was crazy. And so you want to have an idea of how much space you're going to need to where to put them. One year we had to put them in a freshman center storage closet that was filled to the brim of things, and so they told us to put them in there. We opened the doors and there's brooms falling out, let alone where we're going to put our yearbooks. And so we had to reorganize, and it's my yearbook staff right there meeting the delivery driver, having to reorganize it in the moment while he's trying to get this delivery delivered. And so we were frantic, and you don't want to be frantic. You want to have a plan. Here's where they're going to go. I have access to the key. Or they go in your classroom. If they go in your classroom, you need to make sure that you are locking that door at all times. These yearbooks are very valuable. They're worth a lot of money, thousands of dollars, sometimes over $100,000. And if you're not in the habit already of locking your door, or it's been kind of loose because students are in and out interviewing and stuff, these are a hot commodity and you want to make sure that they're protected. So if you can put them in a closet in your classroom or in your workroom or your office space inside your classroom that has a lock on the door, that's going to be a lot better. But sometimes you might have too many books that you can't fit in there, so you need to have a plan of how big are these, how big is the shipment that I should be expecting, and where the heck is it going to go? Do you need any help unloading when they arrive? Depending on your contract, you want to ask your rep, do you have the agreement with the freight shipping or the shipping company that they deliver it from their truck to your classroom? Or do they just need to unload it off the truck and you need students or maintenance workers or custodians to come help you unload them? I've had both situations. Obviously, it's a lot more helpful when the delivery driver helps you get them into your classroom, into their final destination. But I've also had it where their only job is to drop them off at the school. And so it gets off the truck and you have a pallet sitting outside your door and they need to still be transported to their final destination. Those boxes are heavy and kids even struggle to carry one. Sometimes I had 2 kids on one box, and it's logistics. Like, you need to know if they're coming in 6th period and all your seniors are off at early release and you only have your little freshman photo day class and the class is only of 6 people that day because they're all out taking pictures, but that's when they come. You're going to need more manpower than that. So you want to know, like, do you need to have them being unloaded, or is that part of the delivery charge that you're already paying for? If you're already paying for it, utilize it because it's expensive and it's a lot of work. And delivery drivers typically have like really great dollies, and so that can help a lot. So you're not individually carrying boxes. Like I said, where will you store them until distribution? But I always liked to have them in my room because we had a lot of prep to do. So we were checking all the yearbooks, we were putting flyers in them. Some years we had special cover treatments that we had to like peel off stickers or protective layers or place elements into it. And so, you know, that prep time is really helpful if it's in your classroom, so you don't have to go all the way to the freshman center storage closet with the brooms. So if you can store them close by, I would definitely recommend that. And then think about how you will celebrate delivery or reveal your book to your staff. So if your staff is there at delivery, as soon as that delivery driver gets back in his car, you're ripping open those boxes and looking at it. If it's after school and you're the only one there, rip it open and take one home. Absolutely. But you know, if you're able to, if you have a little bit of a heads up and say your yearbook staff doesn't have to help you unload them. One year we wrapped each one in like, you know, the colored butcher paper from the workroom and like wrote their name on it all pretty. And it was like a Christmas present when they opened it, you know, the next day. And so we got to really celebrate the cover and here's your copy and that sort of stuff. The editors helped me wrap them all. And that was really, really fun. Obviously that takes some planning. It depends on how they're being delivered and where your staff is, because sometimes they're just so excited. They're at the truck dancing around it. I've also done that, which is also fun. But think through it. Like, what would you like to do in a perfect world? And then if that doesn't work, what could you do still to celebrate that they're delivered and have everyone look at it? I will also say that if they start to rip through those boxes and look at yearbooks, have them wear gloves, because unless they're actually touching their own yearbook, kids are gross, and especially if you have white covers or a light colored cover, people's fingerprints get on there, Cheeto fingers, whatever. Those are someone else's yearbook that they're touching, and it's a product they paid for. And so you want them to be in pristine condition when they are handed out. So I would definitely recommend, unless you're handing them their actual individual yearbook that they purchased or they reserved, then have them wear some gloves. Okay, and then here's the really fun part about once they get delivered is you need to inspect and count your books to ensure the accuracy. And I know that it's crazy. Believe me, 1,800 books is a lot to go through. But I mean, you need to look through each book for errors. Yes, we'll get to that in a second. But also things like upside down pages. It's so easy for that book block of pages to get put inside the cover upside down. At some points of the production process, it is a manual thing, and it can happen. It's the nature of printing. It happens. It's actually no big deal. But you need to make sure you're aware of those things so you don't pass out a book thinking that it's perfect and then it's actually upside down and then it's already written in, but you can't give a refund and there's messy situations. So you want to be aware of that, but you also want to look for damage. Sometimes in shipping, the corners get messed up. Sometimes in production, the pages get folded and they get crumpled. Sometimes there's ink smears, rips, tears. There's all kinds of things that can happen in the print production process. It doesn't mean that your publisher is bad. It doesn't mean that they're negligent or they don't have quality control. Sometimes it can mean that. But it's just, again, the nature of the printing process. It does happen. There's contingencies built into the contract that you have with your company that if there had to be a reprint, like they will take care of you. So if that happens, don't panic. Don't freak out. I see a lot of posts these days with this time of year in the Facebook groups of advisors being like, what do I do? Half our books are damaged. Sometimes it's a little thing and it's really not that big of a deal, even though it feels like it's a big deal. And so it really kind of check your own priorities and see, like, is this something, worth getting a reprint for or some reprinted? A lot of times it's not. A lot of times it's just, again, it's something that comes with the nature of the process. But you do want to talk to your publisher about that because they will credit you or they will give you money back or they will give you something to, make that right, because it's, again, those are products that someone paid for and you are going to distribute them. And so that needs to be reported and credited on your bill or something. They'll talk to you about how they can make that right. But I don't necessarily mean that you need to flip through each page in each book, but you do need to flip, quickly fan through them, make sure that they're the right side up. And then if you notice that there's something like recurring, like an ink smear, go back and look through others and make sure that that's, consistent on however many books or the chunk, because sometimes they're printed in chunks, and so if you notice it on one book, you might notice it on 20 in that area too, but not all of them, that kind of thing. And then you want to pull copies for your classroom library, your library itself at your school. That's usually given to you by your publisher for free. And then sometimes an administrator will also get one, like the principal. Very rarely do I ever recommend giving free yearbooks away. If your program pays for those yearbooks, even though they're not retail price, every single book is paid for at some point down the line, unless, like I said, your publisher gives you a free copy for the library. But you want to make sure that you don't get in the habit of promising free books to as many people as possible. So if your principal and your classroom and your library, that's a reasonable amount. But every assistant principal doesn't need one. The security guard doesn't need one. They can go look at the library copy if they want, or they can buy one. You might have a discount for your staff, your faculty and staff, to get their own copy. But you don't want to get in the habit of giving away 20 books every year to the school board. I've had all kinds of requests because, especially if the yearbook is really good and really sought after, you're going to sell those books, so you don't want to give them away. And so just kind of like temper the expectations there and don't get in the habit if you can help it. Sometimes you have to fulfill those requests out of tradition or out of some precedent that was set before you get there. But if you have control, then limit what books you give away for free. Okay, so then you need to start thinking about how you're going to prepare the books and promote distribution. So some things you need to think through is the number one tip that every seasoned advisor will give you is you need to include a disclaimer flyer in each book. There's tons of ways to do this. There's lots of different formats you can do. I really like when staffs match the format of this flyer to their theme. So the fonts, the images, the aesthetic of the flyer looks very similar to the theme because it is a cohesive part of the publication. But I also like when staffs make it really in your face, like, hey, look at this. So as you'll notice, this one here, this pink one, it's bright pink paper. It's going to very much stand out in their book, especially say their book is like mostly black and white and their end sheets are black. Like, that's going to stand out and be in your face. There's lots of big calls to action, like, what? Hey, stop. You know, like, it makes it in your face saying, hey, read me. That's what you want it to do. But if you want to make it match because it's part of the publication, like, that's totally fine. But remember, at the end of the day, like, they're going to throw this away. This doesn't stay with the yearbook. So as much as you want to get the information out, worry more about that than the aesthetic. So here's what to put in that. This one is from Kel Lemons. She's amazing. She was an advisor and now she's a yearbook consultant. And she created this when she was an advisor, and it's super simple but straightforward to the point, and it covers all the main things that you need the student to read when they pick up their yearbook. So first thing, like I said, big at the very top is, hey, read me first. You want to grab their attention. You want them to look at it. If it falls out of their yearbook, you want them to pick it up. Like, you want to make sure that they read this, and you want to make sure that this is in every single book that's distributed. So the first thing is, before they write in their book, you want them to make sure that they check it too. It doesn't have any missing pages, torn pages, printing smears, or upside down pages. That's a starter list. There's all kinds of things that could happen, but that's a good list for them to be able to know what to look for. Then if they discover any of these problems, we can replace it for sure. But once they write in their book, you cannot replace it. So you want them to put their name in it, which I'll get to in a second, but you want them to know that they need to do these checks ahead of time and then write in their book after. So after they do that, then you want them to put their name in it. Yearbooks, like I said, are a hot commodity. That once they come out at the end of the year, there's going to be a lot of kids who didn't buy one, and then they decide they want one. And so if they find one that doesn't have a name in it and it hasn't been written in yet, it's super easy to just scoop it up off the floor or the desk or the wherever, lunch table, and take it for their own and walk away like it never happened. So while that's very sad and we don't want that to happen, it does happen, but you can't replace lost or stolen yearbooks. They are going to be at the price that whatever the cash price is at the end of the year, if you have them to sell. If you're sold out, you're sold out. So sorry, little Johnny, but you should have put your name in it, and then we would have known that it was yours. So if it got stolen and it came up, then we could look for it. I had my name in my yearbook. I had my students all signing it. Obviously, I'm the yearbook advisor. I want a copy of it. So it was like 2 or 3 days after distribution. Somehow my own book with my name in it got distributed, and some kid still has it to this day. And so even the name being in it doesn't necessarily mean that it won't get lost or stolen, but at least you gave them the heads up to try and say, put your name in your book. If you have nameplates, even better. Then you're going to have a lot of complaints probably, especially these days, about people that wanted to go by a different name. So it says if you go by Jake, we put you as Jacob, usually their legal name. You go by your middle name instead of your first name. Have a policy in place where they need to tell you at the beginning of the year. So part of the advice for my beginning of the year tasks is, once you have your portraits pages created, or at least your portraits like from your photographer, put them up in a public place in the school, typically the cafeteria, the front office, where the buses come in, somewhere where kids are going to see it. And if it's going to take up a lot of space, so it's good, you want them to see it, and have them check their own name, and then have a QR code to a form where they can request a different name. Have a policy with your district or your school or your campus, your administration, about what names are allowed, if certain names are not allowed. A lot of times these days there are kids that want to go by different names, but a yearbook is a historical document. A lot of times when kids go missing, they're identified by their yearbook picture. And so because it's a historical document, it's not a legal document. Some districts aren't allowing, especially in the portrait section at least, students to go by anything other than their legal name unless their legal name has been changed on the school paperwork. So you just want to make sure you have a policy in place for that it was very clear. Here's how you change it in the beginning of the year. And then at this point, it's the end of the year. And so, hey, here's how you do it for next year. Tell us in August and September. Tell us by this date. Tell us this way. Put a link to the form. Whatever you have to do to communicate that procedure. But at this point, say you're stuck with the official name the school uses. And this also says, hey, it wasn't intentional. You just didn't let us know. Here's, what you can do next year. Because you don't want to be like, well, sorry. You want to address it because people can get very hurt by going with the wrong name. Okay. Then you're going to have complaints about people that just think it doesn't look good or they don't like it for whatever reason. So you want to answer to that too. You want to say, if you have a complaint or a recommendation for next year, please put it in writing. 1, 2, suggest a way to solve the problem. And 3, bring it to my room. Or better yet, join the staff and help us create an even better yearbook next year. See Miss Levins for an application. So this is a great way to recruit. If people are interested in the yearbook, it's in there as well. But also, if you're giving people a platform to complain, again, a Google form is a great way to do it. A form with a little mailbox outside your door, that's a great way to do it. But you want to make sure that they understand that they need to put it in writing, because there's no way that you're going to remember 50 kids' tiny little complaints about a typo or something on distribution day. You're just not. It needs to be written down. And then also suggest a way to fix it, because if they're so high and mighty that they've never made a mistake on their homework, then they better tell us a way to do it, because it's just not realistic. Sometimes I've had teachers even send me complaints about errors in the yearbook, and I'm not a very snarky person. I don't like to go and be overly defensive, so I will just typically say, like, thank you for your suggestion. I've noted, I know that error's in there. Thank you, whatever, and be very kind. But what I want to say is something like, does that mean that everyone in your math class has had 100 on all their tests and quizzes and homework all year long? Because this is my kids' tests and quizzes and homework from the whole year on display for the whole community and school to see. So if a teacher or an adult in the building has a complaint, they need to realize that they're talking about kids' work. Like, even though it's a paid publication and even though it might look super professional, there's going to be mistakes in it. It's a student publication, so they need to get over it. Speaking of, then you want to address the mistakes. And so you're going to put something like, about the mistakes. Believe us, we found them and we're sick about it. Remember, this is a student publication. We make every attempt to produce an accurate account of the year, but errors are bound to happen. Drive that point home. It is a student publication. Something that I really like that some advisors posted about after Game of Thrones came out and that Starbucks cup was in that final scene. They have millions of dollars in budget for production and they still missed the Starbucks cup. We can be forgiven for little tiny typos, right? I think that's a really good analogy to draw. Then, at this time, there's nothing we can do about it. So sorry. Please do not come and tell us. Be kind about it. Say please. But tell them, we already know. You don't need to tell us that we misspelled students and it says students. I know. It sucks. But there's nothing we can do about it now. We're not going to get a sticker to cover up the word students being misspelled. Instead, please focus on the amazing things the book has to offer. And then we make a joke and says, yes, we know mistakes is misspelled. It's a joke, right? Because it says mistakes and that's misspelled. Ha ha ha, it's funny. When you make a joke and you point it back at yourself, it diffuses the situation. It takes the stress out of it. Even when a kid's name is wrong, even when there's a legit mistake that you did make and you did miss and you did overlook something, if you can point it back and be like, look, we're so sorry. You express remorse, express sadness, tell them this is a student publication, but you also make a joke about it yourself and be like, yeah, whoops. Then it just diffuses the whole situation. It makes it a lot easier for everyone, including the adults in the building, to get through. And also prep your kids, your own yearbook staff students. Let them know that we looked through this yearbook hundreds of times. You looked at it, your editor looked at it, I looked at it. Sometimes you have administration look at it. Sometimes you have your rep look at it. The plant looked at it. The printers looked at it. No one caught that. It happens. It's totally okay. It's not the end of the world. Let them know that this is sometimes their first experience having their work published. And that's really hard to take their work and put it out there for the world to see, especially if there's a mistake. It's heartbreaking. It's okay to feel sad about it, but don't let it ruin your experience, because the yearbook is still great. It's still, you finished it. It's like the fact that you published this amazing publication in 9 months or 10 months or whatever is an accomplishment in itself. So celebrate that and don't let the little stuff like bother you. It's going to be okay. So Then you want to rehearse distribution procedures with your staff and role play common things that come up. So this is a picture from my classroom a couple of years ago. This is the morning of distribution. I have my entire staff in there, yearbook, newspaper, photographers. I think I even had a couple of kids that were new to staff the next year to give them some experience, the ones that I really trusted and knew pretty well, just because we needed the manpower. We had a big meeting in the morning. I would have like donuts and breakfast tacos, and we'd like all wear matching shirts. I'll get to matching shirts later. And we'd make it really fun, but I would also go through literally everything they can expect when it comes to distribution. Here's your packet, here's what you get, here's what's at your table, here's what you say in this situation, here's what you don't say, here's what's required to pick up a yearbook, blah, blah, blah. And then I would also tell them, if you have any issues outside of this, send them to me. So I would be we had like a rotunda that we distributed yearbooks in. I would be in that rotunda with my cart. I would have some yearbooks of my own that I would distribute in certain situations. I would have my laptop, so I would be able to look up orders and stuff like that, not from the paper list, but the actual ordering system. And then I would have my email just in case a student needed to have their parent email me for certain situations. And I would tell my students, send all the problem issues, the big stuff to me. Your job is not to worry about that. That's my job. You worry about distributing the yearbooks, that there's a kid, they ordered it, their name's on the list, you have a book for them, and they have their ID, give them a book. That was it. So that kind of made it easier, but there's a lot of stuff to go through, so you want to make sure that they're really well prepared. If they've never had a job before, or they've never had to like interact with strangers before, they should, because they've been in yearbook, but especially the younger ones, this is their first time dealing with something, and it's very fast sometimes, it's really busy, it's chaotic, and that just feels stressful before they even open their mouth, let alone having to answer to somebody asking them a question. Like, make sure that they feel confident in the procedure. Then think about how you organize the personalized books and the accessories. So we always did nameplates because they were a lot easier to organize than actual books that were printed on. And if there's a typo on that nameplate, which typically they type in anyway, that book is useless. You can't even resell it, because it's personalized. And so kind of think through how you'll organize that. With that, how many tables and chairs will you need to have set up? So I would always make a diagram, and I would assign my students to each table, little station. It was alpha split, and then it was also broken up by if they just had a yearbook, or they had a yearbook plus accessories, or they had a yearbook plus accessories plus a nameplate. And then I would put my students all at a certain table, and then I would put a leader, like a manager, someone that was on staff longer, an editor, something like that, and they would be in charge of that station. And then the other people that were assigned to it would be like runners. They would go get more yearbooks, they would go get more flyers, they would bring problem issues to me, that kind of stuff. And then, also talk to your custodial staff about getting those tables and chairs set up ahead of time. You don't want to have to do a day of, because usually you have to like order them to be put there at a certain time. Then you need to organize the books and the sales list for the staff members to quickly verify the purchase. So I usually have my students just bring their ID. We had IDs at our school, so we were able to quickly look at their name, look at their face, make sure that that was them, and have them pick it up. I would have them sign off that they picked up their book, and then they got it. Sometimes schools don't have IDs, so you can use ID numbers, or if they have like virtual IDs on their phones, that's totally fine, but you definitely want to make sure that they verify who they are when they're picking up their book, and have a procedure in place for it. I would always tell my kids, even if it's your best friend, even if it's your brother, do not give a book out without someone seeing their ID. I know that it's annoying. I know that kids forget their IDs. I know that they're going to tell you, but you know me since I was in 3rd grade. I know. I have to. It's not me. I said, blame it on me as the advisor. This is the rule, because I want to be able to say later, no, we checked every single ID. We made sure every kid who was supposed to get a book did get a book. No one else got one, whatever, because stuff does happen, and you want to be able to confidently say that your kids were following the procedure to get the books out to everyone. There were no favorites played. There were no books given away that shouldn't have been, blah, blah, blah. Then you want to print a distribution list. So you want to make sure you have room for their space to sign off for it. You don't want to give out books and just highlight them, because that's too easy to mistake. And if there's a signature by their name and they picked it up, they can't come back and be like, oh, I didn't get it. And then you're like, well, you're highlighted. Maybe you highlighted the wrong one. Like, it's just too difficult. So on your distribution list, you really only need first name, last name, maybe if they have an ID number, if you're identifying that way, and then what kind of order they have, if it's yearbook only, accessories, or nameplate, or both, and then a little spot for them to sign. And I would always make the space really wide because kids are kids, and so give them lots of space to sign so they don't mess it up. Here is a picture of my like distribution prep. So with each little bundle, there's all the accessory packets, there's the flyers to put in the books, the little boxes there are the nameplates, and so I'd have one of those for each station, and so they were super well prepared. They just had it all right there, and they were ready to go. Then talk about promotion. How will you advertise yearbook distribution info? Where is it? When is it? How is it? There's tons of ways to do this. You can do it at lunches, at after school, before school, on a weekend, on a weeknight. If you have a summer distribution, I've seen a lot of people do like a drive-through, especially during COVID. There's lots of ways to do it, and every school is different. And especially if you have a parent that's like they have kids at multiple schools, it's all going to be different. So make sure you get that info out as early as possible, and it's very clear and it's very organized, so people know, do parents pick up yearbooks? Do kids pick up yearbooks? Can I pick up my brother's yearbook? Can I pick up my foreign exchange student's yearbook? Whatever, because it's all different at every school. So make sure it's very clear for parents to know what the process is. And then, do you have any extra copies for sale? How much are they? How can they be paid for? When and where are they available? If you have a way for people to pay digitally, like you have a school system where they can put a product and they can pay online, highly recommend that, because then you can receive a copy of each like receipt or invoice, and then you can know whose books those go to. If not that, then you could do a cash or check. Cash is a little tricky because you need to be the one collecting that cash. Don't let students take $100 bills from parents. That's just a recipe for disaster, so make sure you have that. Also, make sure you have a receipt book to make sure you have some sort of proof of purchase to give back to them, so you have a copy and so do they. You can buy them at Walmart. They're very cheap, or Amazon or whatever. And then you also want to make sure that they're a little higher priced than your highest pre-sale, because you want to build in that FOMO, that fear of missing out. You want them to pre-order next year, right? So even if you have extra copies and you do want to sell them, you want to build in a little bit of incentive for the next year to train your community. We're not always going to have extra books. And that goes to saying, if this is your first year and you have a ton of extra books to sell at the end of the year, do not order extra next year. Maybe a couple, like 10, but don't go crazy ordering extra books at the hopes you'll sell them. You want to train your community to pre-order them, so that way you're not stuck with hundreds of books left over that you can't sell. It's really hard that first year when people don't know that, and then they didn't pre-order, and then at the end of the year they're mad, but it's worth it in the long run because they will learn. They definitely won't forget next year. And then, how will you notify the students who have purchased a book ahead of time? Like I said, we're talking about distribution in a general sense, but you also need to talk to students who have purchased, because a lot of times parents don't tell their kids that they have purchased a yearbook. So you want to tell them in some form or fashion. A flyer, a email is good, but like their kids aren't checking their emails and parents barely check their emails. This is something that I got from Samantha Berry. She would make these little color-coded bracelets, and that was their ticket out of class to come pick up their book. It was at lunchtime, but they could get out a little bit early to beat the crowd. And then the color corresponded to what line they needed to go to. So, and there were balloons that marked off where they needed to go. So blue was, yearbook only. Purple was yearbook plus nameplate, and then green was yearbook plus accessories. You don't have to break down the colors like that. You could also just do a straight alpha split and put like A through C at this table, C through D at this table, whatever. This was the best way for me to do it because I had so many books to distribute, but it really depends on your particular staff, how many kids you have helping, as well as how many yearbooks you have to distribute, the space you have available. There's so many factors, and there's really no perfect way to do it. There is no recommended way to distribute that works for everyone. As long as you're organized and you're confident in your own system, you're fine. You're golden. Okay, and then distribution itself. Let me get myself out of my own way. Do you distribute the yearbooks directly to them, like through a homeroom, an English class, an advisory period? Do you have them pick it up, like at a lunchtime, that kind of thing, or after school? Or do you mail it home? All of those options are really common. There might be others that I didn't even add here, but as long as you know what the procedure is, then you're able to communicate that to parents. And then when are they distributed? Like I talked about, after school, you could have a distribution party. That's really popular, where the kid has like that wristband and that gets them out of class. And then everyone has like colorful pens and Sharpies, and they're looking at the yearbook and they're signing it. There's music playing. There's like cupcakes there. There's punch. You know, you could have a hour party at the end of the day. Put your school on pep rally schedule. That's really popular towards the end of the year because they're really not doing much in class. But sometimes admin wants them to be doing stuff in class and they aren't supportive of it. So it's up to you and your school again. During lunches is when I always did it because it was during school. After school, I know kids weren't going to come because at my school, they were very busy. They were in a bunch of extracurriculars, and their parents were working. And so like I knew I had to do it during the school day, and it just wasn't feasible either to do it during English because that would kind of disrupt classes. And there were so many, like that would have been crazy to like divide up. So then when you're planning your distribution day, if you're doing it like during school, you want to make sure that you're not conflicting with any of the state testing, AP exams, final exam schedule, all that sort of stuff. And you also want to double check and make sure that there's no fire drill, assembly, pep rally, special speaker, some other sort of just like interruption that would cause problems to your distribution. You really want distribution to be like the thing that's happening today on campus. Also, I wouldn't put the fire drill thing in there unless it happened to be. And so it was a moment of panic for sure. And there was no way to proper plan this. But basically we had all the yearbooks. We prepped all the yearbooks during the first couple class periods of the day. The lunch periods were 4 lunch periods back to back. And then the end of the day, we like packed up all the ones that didn't get distributed and took them back to my room. Not 5 minutes before the lunch bell rang, maybe 10 minutes because it was, planned. We had all the books out, kids ready. We were waiting on people to come down and get their yearbooks. The fire drill goes off, and there's thousands of kids in the hallway, over $100,000 worth of yearbooks in the rotunda, and my kids literally using their bodies to block them from being stolen off the table. Because I'm telling you, they're hot commodities. They will get stolen off the table. And I'm in the middle of the rotunda, like looking at them, like panicked, literally about to break down in tears because I'm freaking out. Like, what do I do? Can I leave my kid? Do they need to get out of the building? Is it a drill? Surely they wouldn't do a fire drill on yearbook distribution day. They did. And so then I have APs yelling at me because my kids aren't moving and they're body blocking these other kids from them being stolen, and they need to get out of the building because the fire marshal is there, of course. And so eventually APs watched the yearbooks, but I also had a quarter mile down the building in the freshman center yearbooks as well. So eventually they communicated, they got the yearbooks guarded, and we got out of the building. Then we got to go back in, and we were luckily let in first because we had to go guard the yearbooks and get ready for distribution. That was just interrupted. But just double check that. Just make sure that's not happening because it was crazy and I can feel the anxiety bubbling up talking about it. Not fun. Okay, and then if you're going to do a signing party, make it really fun. Like, make it, again, that fear of missing out. The kids that don't get to go to this because they didn't buy a yearbook, they want to be there. So the next year, they're so excited to buy a yearbook because they want to be a part of it, right? Or have a signing party where everyone gets out of school. Everyone has that fire drill. No. Everyone has that assembly period or pep rally period. And they all go out to the football field or something, and they get to celebrate and have a yearbook too, but they don't have one to sign. So that also kind of is another way to build in that fear of missing out. Even though they get to go to the party, they probably really want a yearbook. So, you can also sell pens and accessories, but make that event really, really fun. And then lastly, if you're selling extra copies, create a sales kit. Make sure you are super prepared. I've had a wait list before, but I didn't actually take a wait list because that's chaos. It was more of like a line outside my room, and it was like, after school at 3:00, we're selling these yearbooks. Here's what they cost. It's first come, first serve. But once that happened, they sold out in like 15 minutes, but you need to be prepared. You need to have that receipt book, have pens, have a cash envelope, have a lockbox. You need to be there again collecting cash if that's the case. The kids can have them being signed for, but you just want to be really organized with those extra copies because hopefully you don't have a lot. If you do, hopefully you sell them, but sometimes they can be really competitive and you're going to have parents calling, trying to get a copy because they're at work, and it was just first come, first serve. So that can be a little crazy, but again, the more you plan it ahead of time, the easier it'll be. All right, so then some procedures that you need to think through, if you haven't already, is how are students verifying that they are the purchaser? Like I said earlier, the IDs is a really easy way to do that. You will have situations where siblings try to pick up their book, or you might have a homebound student, their friend is trying to pick up a book. Those things are typically okay, like they're legit. Like if a parent doesn't trust their freshman student and they want their senior student to pick it up, totally fine. But just have them email you ahead of time, and so that way they come to the problem cart where you are, and that you have that email in your inbox, and then you can be like, no problem, here, sign off on your yearbook. You don't want it to go without an email written verification that was allowed, because then a freshman student will go and try and pick up their yearbook, but their senior brother already picked it up, and they're like, I didn't get my yearbook, what do you mean? And they, don't communicate clearly. And so you just want to make sure that is very clear in writing with your email. Do you accept digital IDs or photos of the ID or physical copy only? We had temporary IDs, but they were just a sticker and there was no ID on them. So I didn't accept the temporaries, but I would accept like a picture of it or the digital ID on their like grade book. So that's totally fine. But just make sure, again, it's very clear. Here's what your students, your own yearbook staff, it knows what's acceptable to use. And then, can students pick up their siblings' yearbook? Can they pick up their neighbor's yearbook? Whatever. How can teachers pick up their yearbook? Are they expected to go wait in line, like with the kids, and get their yearbook? Will you put it in their box? Will you drop it off at their room? Make sure they know how to do it, or otherwise they're going to be confused and be waiting in line, and then they didn't have to, and then they're like, this is dumb, I'm a teacher. Just make sure they know. And then where do students go if they're not on the list, but they think they purchased a yearbook? Probably one of the most common complaints, because their moms bought a yearbook every single year. Of course they bought one. Well, they forgot or whatever. And so they think they're on the list. They wait in line. They get there. They're not on the list. And then they get really mad. And so send them to you guys, and then you can double check the orders. And typically, I can say in all the distributions I've had, I've never had a parent actually purchase a yearbook and me not have record of it. The purchasing platforms for all the yearbooks are very reliable. Typically, they think they bought a yearbook and they didn't, or they bought one for a different school for a sibling and they didn't, or I've had them like buy last year's yearbook or something crazy and they didn't buy one for this year. And so it's pretty easy to track down, and typically they actually just didn't buy one. But you want to make sure that your students know to send them to you. And then after distribution day, if there are students who didn't pick up their book, when do they get theirs? Are they being delivered to their classes? Are they going to be having to come before or after school? What you don't want to do is have teachers sending kids to your classroom in the middle of your other classes as you're trying to teach Photo J, newspaper, whatever, and them trying to come up get their yearbook because they're not busy in that class, but you're trying to teach. I did have a second door in my classroom, and I set up like a little, we called it like the store, where my students who were not busy or had off periods or whatever could work the store and pass out yearbooks that way. That's really helpful because it doesn't disrupt my classes, but you want to make sure you're very clear and have a sign on your door of when people can pick up their yearbooks if they didn't get it on distribution day, because they'll just barge in. They just do what they want. And then what do students do if their book is damaged? If they do find from that flyer they were told their pages are upside down, where do they go and what do they do to get their book either swapped out or, refunded or whatever. Refunds I wouldn't recommend, but you can swap it out and then report that book to your publisher. I will say that if there's damaged books, don't feel like those are trash. You can sell damaged books and sell them for a discount, $5 off. You don't have to go crazy. Don't do half off. They're still valuable, especially the upside down ones. Those are almost more valuable. Like, kids want the upside down book. I had an editor who wanted the upside down book really bad. And so I was like, I don't care. Do you? Like, you can have it if you want it, as their yearbook, as their purchase. But don't feel like those damaged books are trash. Like, you can sell them too. Okay, and then how do you deliver books with students who have moved? You can typically have them mailed, but then they will need to pay for shipping because it's pretty expensive to mail your books. And then you also need to think about, if you don't have a spring delivery, if you have a fall or a summer, the foreign exchange students. So if they've purchased a yearbook, it is very expensive to ship internationally. And so typically you give it to their host family, and they're probably going to ship a box of stuff, like little treats and stuff, in a couple months anyway, so you can throw it in with that. But you want to make sure, again, that that's something you think about ahead of time, so you're not stuck with a couple $100 in shipping a heavy yearbook to a kid who lives in Germany. And then, do you offer refunds for any reason? This is important for you to think through, as well as for your administration to know. So sometimes complaints will go straight over your head, even though you have a procedure in place, and they'll go straight to the admin, or they'll go straight to the super board or superintendent of the school board or whatever, and they will request or demand a refund or a reprint or whatever. And sometimes if the person that they went to isn't knowledgeable in the printing process or the publishing process or yearbooks in general, they'll be like, yeah, we can get you a reprint, no problem, when we talk to the teacher. And you're like, are you kidding? Like, no, we can't just go to Kinko's and get this reprinted. Like, we can't do that, and we can't give a refund because students is misspelled, you know. And so they sometimes, to appease parents, will say things that are very, very impossible or very, very costly. And so you want to make sure that your admin, at the very least, if not higher than that, is very well versed in here's what we do if this happens. If you can, work up a little, like a worksheet of commonly asked questions, give it to your front office, give it to your principals, so that way they know how to answer those questions. It's totally fine also if they forward those calls to you, but if you have a lot of traction, if you have a lot of like communication from parents that have complaints, you might want to have that front line be the principals or the secretaries, because they can handle a lot of those questions before it gets to you. And then this is also really important because hopefully you never need it, but if you do, you want to have a pre-typed response ready for really big issues that may require a crack and peel. It's called a crack and peel because on the back of it, like you crack it and the sticky part comes off, and so the sticker's really easy to place in a yearbook. But you want to make sure that if there's something that's really big, it happens every year. You'll see it in a couple weeks when yearbooks start to come out. There's going to be advisors, poor sweet advisors, that end up on the news because of something they missed in the yearbook, and then people, the mainstream media just loves to exploit issues, even though it's student work. And there are legitimate, really big issues in yearbooks that you might need to have a sticker replace. That is totally fine. Like, you can have that, and a crack and peel sticker will save you sometimes. But in the emotion of that moment happening, you don't want to have to crank out an email that explains it or defends it or whatever. So have a pre-approved, pre-written message. You're obviously going to edit it before it goes out if needed, but you want to make sure you have something ready to go, so that way in the moment you're not emotionally charged and trying to write this email that might come across overly defensive because you're like, these are students, these are my students. So in the same vein, the last thing you need to do is the mental prep. The first thing is that you just need to remember that it will all be okay. I know that I just talked for almost an hour or whatever of like all the things that can go wrong and how it's so stressful and how it's the worst. But honestly, it's also the best. Like, getting that yearbook that you worked so hard on and you waited for in the hands of students, and you seeing them flip through it and smiling, and seeing your own students like smell the ink in the paper. It is the most fun. It is such a good day. Even with all the stressful, crazy things that happen, it is a great opportunity. It's a great day on campus. And so just so you know that like there might be something crazy that happens. There was one time that I had a crazy parent yelling and screaming at me and telling me that I am the worst at my job, and then she's going to go to the superintendent and she's going to get me fired. And I was like crying on the way home, and I was literally so upset. And then my husband was like, but it's okay. Like, it's just yearbook. And I was like, but I love yearbooks. And yes, I do. This is coming from me, the queen of loving yearbooks. I've been involved in yearbook since I was in 8th grade, but it's just a yearbook. And like, honestly, like, no one ever died because of a yearbook, creating a yearbook, because of their picture in a yearbook. And as much as we love them, and as much as we value them, and as much as like we think they are so important, they're just yearbooks, you know? Like, it's not that deep. You also did not ruin anyone's life. The parent that was yelling at me that made me cry told me that I ruined their kid's senior year, and they're not going to be able to enjoy graduation and prom because of this. And I was like, I did? And no, I didn't. Like, it's not that deep. It's not a big deal. It feels like the end of the world, but it's not. Again, harp on this. It's a student publication, and mistakes happen. They will happen. They're bound to happen. They should be expected. This is the arena for students to make mistakes. It's okay. And then, like we said, a crack and peel sticker can save a lot of things. One year I screwed up. I was putting the senior favorites in the yearbook, and that's a page that I did because it was a secret to my students. And something got messed up in the links because we used InDesign, and the same picture got put in all 8 spots. And I was like, oh my God, like, what did I do? And luckily it actually wasn't my fault, but we had to get full page stickers to cover up those spreads and get those pictures replaced. And it did take a lot of time putting that in there, but it's totally fine. You can't even tell. Those stickers are incredible. They are like really heavy duty adhesive. They're not coming off once they're in there, and they blend in perfectly with the yearbook paper. It's totally, totally fine if you have to get a crack and peel sticker to add a student, to change a name, to whatever. But also, don't stress about the little stuff. If you misspelled students, if there's a typo, don't sweat it. It is okay. Like, only get a crack and peel, because they can be kind of pricey. Only get a crack and peel if you truly need one, if you have a really big issue. And if it's something like you left a student out because they missed the deadline, but they're a senior and they need their portrait in there, buy them like 50 or 15 or 20, however many like you think is good, but based on their own friends. Like, every senior in the school doesn't necessarily need that student in their yearbook. Like, give them enough for their friends and their family, and that will be enough. The deal with the senior favorites, that needed to be in every yearbook. If you have a really big mistake, there are ways that publishers can strip out those pages and put what's called a tip-in and stick those pages back into the yearbook. It is a lot more of a process. You typically have to ship them back and then get them shipped back, so it takes time. But there are a lot of crazy things that can happen with really big, egregious mistakes. So even in the most crazy of situations where something is really, truly needing to be out of that yearbook before it's distributed, or even after, I've heard of things yearbooks being pulled back for after distribution, they can be fixed. So it's truly not the end of the world. And then my last piece of advice is cry it out. Like, let yourself feel it. Be sad. Be angry that someone's treating you poorly, but don't accept being yelled at. Like, hang up the phone. You can call back when you're calm and you're going to treat me like an adult, a professional, and also giving the situation the merit it deserves. Like, again, it's just a yearbook. I will do whatever I can to help you, but I'm not going to be screamed at by an angry parent. Learn from it, make a note for next year, and then move on. Don't let it ruin your banquet. Don't let it ruin your final weeks of school with your precious seniors. Don't let it ruin your summer. Don't quit your job because of an angry parent. It's going to be okay. I promise it's going to be okay. Okay, so then to wrap up, the very last thing is that you need to remember that these are kids. To them, to the students that their name was misspelled or their picture was missing, it feels like the end of the world. And that's because they're kids. They're as big as you. They look like adults. They act like adults sometimes. But physiologically, they are children. Their frontal lobe is not developed yet. And so we have to remember that when dealing with them. So it's really hard sometimes because they're super emotional or they're super angry and they're hypercharged on hormones. And it can be really stressful when there's like 50 of them and one of you and they're all angry and you're like, I'm in charge of this and I screwed up. Even if you did screw up, it's okay. They are not going to die because the yearbook misspelled their name. And I know that that's hard to explain to them because of where they're at. But at the end of the day, the truth is that it's not the end of the world, even if it feels that way. As for the parents, their frontal lobes are developed, and so I don't have an explanation for why they act the way they do, or the other teachers in the building when they get all wild and crazy, and they start complaining about the yearbook having a typo in it. But you have to take it with a grain of salt and like go into it with a prepared mindset and know that like they're just angry right now. It's going to be okay, and we'll move on, and everyone's going to be fine at the end of the day. Okay, so then I have a little bit of a bonus tip. Because yearbook distribution can be stressful, and again, I don't want to scare you. It's really a great day on campus, but because it can be stressful, I want you to intentionally find ways to make it fun. So like I said, have matching t-shirts. Ours, my editors put it together because they had been through a couple of distributions, and it said, well, that was fun, period. Just to kind of poke fun at the point that like it isn't always fun. And then it said yearbook distribution, the Odyssey 2019, whatever. So we had really bright t-shirts that people could see who's on yearbook staff, and then we had them have a little kind of snarky comment, it being fun because it was stressful. And then also like I said, I had a quarter mile in between where we were distributing with the 9th grade center and the main campus. And so one year I wore my rollerblades and I skated down the campus, and obviously get admin approval before this. And obviously like make sure you can rollerblade before you do this. Don't do it and then break your leg or knock out your ankle with a scooter. But like have fun with it. Like we had headsets from the theater department, and so we could like walkie-talkie between both, because there's only one of me and like like I couldn't be in both places at one time. And so you want to make sure that you have communication with them and they don't feel abandoned, but you're also there, you know, back and forth throughout the distribution, because again, it can be stressful, it can be crazy. And so I wore rollerblades to make that a little bit, you know, more fun. My students, they once they were set up and they were ready, they made these little videos, which was fun. They did the, the wave. They were very excited. And then this one, they were singing and they like coordinated it between all the tables. It was a little silly. And then this isn't from me. I don't have credit. I don't want to take credit for this. I don't know who did it though. It was in one of the Facebook groups. So if this is from you, please let me know. I will definitely add your credit in the description. But this is a little like bracket of like the yearbook complaints that you're bound to hear. And so I just think it's so funny because these are things that every yearbook advisor hears. And it's stuff like, I know my kid didn't show up for picture day or retakes, but why isn't he in the yearbook? It's like, what did you expect me to do? Like go get him out of English and take a picture of him in the hallway? That's not how this works. Or, I know I missed the deadline, but can I have a yearbook even though they're sold out? Well, we're sold out, so no. This yearbook has too many words, especially from kids. We hear that a lot. Can I proof my club's page or coverage before it prints next year? No, that's the yearbook staff's job. Sometimes, yes. I will say sometimes I would let like a club sponsor that was like really great to us proof it, because I made an error in the past. Like I left like out a certain orchestra, and so like I didn't know any better, and so like it is kind of helpful to have their input, but not necessarily approval. Or the classic, you've ruined my child's senior year. No, I didn't. Parent wants a refund because they hate the photos that they selected for the senior ad. Like, ma'am, you submitted those to us. You chose them. Yeah, I want a refund. What? No. Or a petition. Oh, the petitions to reprint the yearbook because of the amount of typos or because of the colors or because of the cover, whatever. The amount of petitions that kids create. Look on change.org. Look for yearbook. Like, it's crazy. Or the fact that yearbook signatures will not be permitted. Sometimes admin doesn't let you have that time in the day, which is kind of sad. Honestly, I love that yearbook signature time, but sometimes admin isn't here for it. Or things that only positive stories belong in the yearbook. If you have a certain, coverage of something and they don't feel like that should be in the yearbook, that's not the place. Engineering club is the most important thing and it wasn't featured enough. Classic. Clubs are always fighting for that real estate. What I like to say is in that situation, if you'd like extra space, you can buy an ad, but it's our job to ensure equitable coverage for all clubs. Even though it's the most important thing in your opinion, you're welcome to buy an ad next year. Or once the yearbook comes out, is it too late to get a senior ad? How am I going to put that in there? What? And then this one is really the thing that made me cry on that phone call is I'll be speaking to my attorney about this. And I was a brand new baby advisor. I was 23. I had just started teaching and I was like, you'll speak to your what about this? And I was like so scared. And honestly, no attorney is going to take a case about a year. I don't want to say that. Sometimes there are situations that like are worthy of an attorney, but their name being misspelled is not it. Why'd you take out senior quotes? It's our tradition. If you're taking out senior quotes, which you should, there's a blog on the organizedadvisor.com about it. You're going to make some people angry the first year. I doubt you'll hear from them the second year. It's just a one-time kind of complaint, and sometimes that's a hard thing to answer to. There's a ton of reasons that you can back it up with though, but you probably won't hear complaints year two. Is there anyone higher than you that I can speak to? The principal, but good luck because we're on the same page. And then why do they cost so much is pretty common too. The yearbooks are expensive. They really are, but so is everything. Eggs, have you seen the price of eggs? Like everything's expensive. And then parents complain about misspelled personalization, which they typed themselves online. Classic. It's like, where do you store the audacity? Really where? Like I want a place to store some. But all in all that said is I want to tell you that you got this. I absolutely promise. I know that yearbook distribution, I just talked about this for an hour. It's a lot to do. It's a lot of logistics. It can be really stressful. But the more that you plan it, the more you have a policy, a plan, a procedure in place, the easier it will go and it will be one of your favorite days because even the stressful things won't stress you out. So I hope that was helpful. I would love to hear in the comments any advice that you guys have for your distribution, how you guys do it, what you recommend. We'd love to share that with the community, with each other. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.